welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. Welcome. We have plenty to discuss today. Of course, we will continue to talk about war on blacks. It is a topic in which we discuss race relation in America. Today we will continue also the conversation about the crisis of leadership in the country in general, but in the Republican Party in particular. There is a topic that's making the round in Washington and that's being debated across the country, and which is a hot topic: anti-Semitism. We will talk about that today as well. And finally, we will take a look at what's upcoming, the 2020 election. I am MD, host of the fourth branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The fourth branch project is not associated with any political party, and we at the fourth branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome to Race Relation in America. If you join us for the first time, well, yes, the banner War on Blacks is to point to a very specific set of facts. There have been casualties from the time that blacks were chased in Africa, captured, and taken journeys that cost lives and sold across the world. There have been casualties. Today, we take a look back, not in Africa, but rather right here in the United States of America, as to what we all been claiming is progress made with race relation in America. We left off last time talking about what happens beyond the Civil War. Now, if you have not been with us, you may not necessarily be abreast that we took a trip back to the period of slavery in order to understand the dynamic, the relationship between blacks and whites. And we have been going through this journey, and at that point, we had a civil war that was fought to put an end to slavery. Fortunately, those who fought to put an end to slavery won. So blacks were freed. Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Act, which gave blacks freedom officially. Now, today, when we talk about race relation, and even when the issue of slavery comes up in the conversation, it is always mentioned as a sideshow, like something that really doesn't matter anymore because slavery has been over for 1.5 centuries. So why bring it up? Why talk about it? Now, as I mentioned, in order to understand the dynamic, the relationship between blacks and white, we had to take a trip back all the way to slavery. And we did. And for that reason, if you have not been watching this program, I encourage you to take a look at the People Branch YouTube channel. That's People Branch YouTube channel. The graphic on the screen will provide you a step-by-step how to get to the People Branch in order to take a look at the previous video that we've already made on that topic. Granted, we have made videos on many other topics as well, but if you're interested in this particular topic that we are talking about, race relation, once you get to the People Branch YouTube channel, you can look for race relation, you can look for war on blacks, you can look for institutionalized racism. Those are the 3 banners under which discussion about race relation are found. And while you're on the People Branch YouTube channel, I also encourage you to subscribe to that channel and as well to follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. It would be very important for us to know that 1, you are interested in the program, and 2, then you can receive invites, you can receive updates, and also you can be kept abreast of other activities that we have in regard to this program. Now, this particular topic, we're going to be very succinct today in order to move the process of the discussion. We have plenty forward. Yesterday I showed you a video of a gentleman in Denver, Colorado. Black gentleman was cleaning, picking up trash in his backyard, his own backyard. And what happened next, and thank God he didn't get shot, but what happened next is police officers show up, a total of 8 of them altogether show up. 4 of them had their gun drawn. Now, one thing that's been very, especially in the black community, the blacks know that the presence of a police officer doesn't make them feel good, doesn't make them feel any safer. Usually we hear that police officers are to serve and to protect. For blacks, it's just the opposite. Whenever there is a police officer in the area where blacks are, our lives are more in danger than we feel protected. That particular case that we discussed yesterday show you that a black man picking up trash on his in his backyard. Now, we don't know who called. We don't know the detail of who called on that black man. But the bottom line is, police officer showed up, and the next thing you know is they have their gun drawn, ready to shoot at a black man. Ask yourself what the reason. Now, I would give the benefit of the doubt. They don't know why the person called, but they, as a police officer, now the first thing that you do, if indeed you were to suspect the person has a weapon, is to assess the situation, right? But nothing was assessed. The first thing that they do, and that's the state of affair for blacks in the United States of America. They're more prone to lose their lives whenever you hear a police officer is on the scene. Now, I had people pushing back and say, what, war on blacks because of this title? War suggests casualties. And every time there is a law enforcement among blacks, there is the likelihood of casualties become very high. So yes, there has been a war on blacks. And what actually makes it so important for people to understand that's the case is because the outcome of a police officer shooting a black man, unarmed black man, and getting away with it is also very high. We've seen it across the country. In fact, for the past 2 to 3 weeks, I've been giving you example of such where police officers shooting unarmed black men, and the next thing you know, they say, well, I was afraid for my life. So the predicament as to what happens beyond the Civil War, we will answer that question. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we will make that journey that we started from since the era of slavery. That journey we started, we're going to pick up right where we left off and try to get an understanding as to why today, in 21st century, not only we have a problem with the fact that law enforcement is more prone to kill individuals than they are to protect them. In fact, every time I hear that a police officer does something that police officer is supposed to do, and the person is hailed as a hero, as if the ordinary thing that a police officer does is not within the realm of the job. That's what, if a police officer protects someone, if a police officer helps someone, that's not a heroic act. It is what law enforcement is supposed to do. Now, for blacks, to give you a sense as to how bad it is for blacks, you may recall in 2014, after Michael Brown was shot by a police officer. By the way, Michael Brown, black, police officer white, Michael Brown was unarmed, police officer, hey, I was afraid for my life. That's the line by all police officers who execute a black man. Their defense is, I was afraid for my life. And if you remember this particular predicament, let me give you, show you what I'm talking about. This is that black man you're looking at that's closer to your screen. And the police officer you're looking at, right in front of him, one already has its weapon drawn, actually both, and the one on the far right of the screen actually was the person that black man did hand his ID to see that he does live where he is picking up trash. Now, you would think about it. You would think, let's say someone called in and say, there is a black man on someone's backyard. Now, let's suppose, for sake of argument, that's the call. Most likely a white woman or a white man would call, maybe because they hate black men. So call and say, there is a black man on someone's backyard with whatever. Now, the police show up, and the guy gave you his ID and clearly show that he is in his home picking up trash. What do you think should happen next? That police officer should call off the whole thing and then everybody goes home. No, that's not what happened. What happened next, another police car showed up with 4 other police officers In total, there were 4 officers with gun drawn and having an argument with the guy. Now, it is very lucky for that guy that he didn't die in that particular predicament. But usually what happened, the police officers are looking for a reason to shoot a black man and then to declare that they were afraid for their lives. Now, this particular predicament that I just gave you is not really it's not complex. Someone calls in, okay, law enforcement shows up, you look at the guy's ID, where he's at, it is home, then that's the end of the story. What are they doing there with gun drawn, waiting for an opportunity to shoot the guy? I mean, seriously, do you think that would have happened to a white man? Of course not. We all know that this particular predicament is blacks are prone to be killed by police officer, and the reason that they're so eager to kill black men is because they always get away with it. The system makes it such that there is always a reason. The way that it works today, in the past, white slave owners just kill a black man, and that's the end of the story. Today, a white police officer kill a black man. 1 year goes by and they do some charade of justice, pretending that there is going to be hearing, they're going to hear what happened, what didn't happen, and the most likely outcome is the police officer will not be charged. Talking about that, just a few days ago in California, both the district attorney and the attorney general just exonerated 2 cops who killed a black man who was armed with his wallet, because that was the excuses that the officers gave for killing the black man, by saying that they thought he had a gun. His wallet in his hand, that's what he had, a gun. Now they both exonerated. So we are living in a society that condones police officer committing murder and getting away with it over and over and over across the country. So that's the reason whenever you call a police officer, then you almost call a police officer to kill a black man. If you have an argument with a black person, instead of you taking a gun and killing that person, you call a police officer, because they will kill the person and they will cover up, and they will give you some reason that they were afraid for their life, because that's always the line. That's the line that police officers have been using. Now, in the past, society used to tell you it's a few bad apples. That was the excuses given by society to condone those actions by white police officers. Today, because of technology, and we're seeing the whole thing evolving right under our eyes, they cannot talk about a few bad apples anymore, because it happened too frequently and it happened across the country. Now the next course of action is to come up with some ways to get to not punish those who have been committing crime against black, by saying, well, I think it's justified, because I just couldn't comprehend that both Attorney General and District Attorney exonerated 2 cops who killed an unarmed black person because they thought his wallet was a gun. So why would police officers not continue to execute black people on the street? Why wouldn't they? Because they're very certain that they're going to be exonerated. All it does is a setback. They have to sit down someplace or be on desk duty, and 1 year later there is some charade of justice and they're back on the street to kill some more black people. Yes, society has made it such that when we say war on blacks, we don't say it to sensationalize this discussion. We say it because this is exactly what is happening in our society. And we've been condoning it, and we think, oh, it's black people. The same thing that was happening during slavery, the same thing happening today. The only difference, it was the white slave owners. Today, it's white police officers. That's the difference. But as far as the outcome, is exactly the same for black people. So what happened beyond slavery? You want to know what happened beyond slavery? Well, this is a taste of what blacks are coping with beyond slavery. That every day our lives are in jeopardy by the very people whose job is supposed to protect it. That's what happened beyond slavery. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. We are going to talk about anti-Semitism. This is the face of what has been the debate of anti-Semitism in Washington. But before we get there, we will take a look at crisis of leadership in the Republican Party. As you know, that just before the 2018 midterm election, Republicans were in total control of all branches of the government. And as such, you would expect that a party that has all level of government, that they can make miracle happen. They can make things because there is no hindrance, there is nothing that can stop them. And if they have anything good to offer to the country, guess what? They can do it because nobody can oppose that. And yet, that's not what we had. So stick with me for a moment. We'll come right back to discuss why the crisis of leadership in the Republican Party is a problem that should concern not just the Republican, but the country as a whole. As I was saying earlier, that for 2 years, Republicans control both houses, the executive branch controlled by a Republican, And what agenda did they have for the country? Now, think about it for a moment. I talk here a lot about the fact that when the framers of the Constitution provided a structure of government with the three equal branches, they had something extremely important in mind. And remember, they came from England, and they were under a form of government they didn't like. It's king and queen, and in those type of environment, you do not have any control over your own body. If the king, the queen wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, and you happen to be the person that they feel that they want to kill, nobody can stop that. Of course, it's extreme. I use that example as extreme, but the bottom line is nobody can tell the queen or the king, could tell the king or the queen that it's not right, because whatever decision he or she made was final. Now, I'm sure that they had advisor people that they listened to, but the ultimate decision to do something could be on a whim, and it could be because they have a beef with someone, whatever the case was. So the framers of the Constitution decided that they wanted a form of government which doesn't give that kind of power to any one individual. So that's why we have this structure in our government. We had three equal branches of the government. What that means is, and the way that they subdivided the task was also brilliant, because they divided the task in such a way that each branch has to work, has to do some compromise with the other branch in order to get the country moving forward. So this way, not any one of the three branches could assume too much power and change the structure, change the form or the way that the government's supposed to work. Especially for the executive branch, which the President of the United States could do things that if there was no check, that president could become pretty much a king, do whatever he wants. Now, you may recall that Donald Trump did shut down the government. You may recall that. And the reason that Donald Trump shut down the government is because he was looking for money to build a wall. Now, we're not going to talk about the wall, but I just want to make this very specific point about how the three branches of the government are supposed to work together in order to make to get things moving in the right direction for the country. So, and because Congress, which is now in the hands of the Democrat, would not give Donald Trump, the executive branch, what he was after, so he decided he's going to force Congress' hands. So by shutting down the government, his hope was that enough people will complain, and those in the House will get enough pressure, political pressure, will get enough pressure that get them to change course and give him what he was after. Now, the framers of the Constitution, what they did is, the president has a lot of power, as one individual, or if you want, as one branch. But what they did that was also brilliant is they confer the purse, if you like, to the House. In other words, if the executive branch wants to do something that costs money, then the executive branch has to go to the legislative branch and say, I want to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Would you see to it that I get money allocated for that? I would like to do it. Now, what that does for the country, which is actually very good for the country, because imagine that the president didn't need to go to Congress. Imagine that whatever the president wanted to do, he could do it on his own. Then what would be the point of Congress? Now, just a side note, that's also what Adolf Hitler did in 1933. By 1934, after the president of Germany died, what he did is he had both Reichstag and Reichsrat sign what they call a temporary, give him plenary power, temporarily, although temporarily was 4 years, that's a long time, signed a legislation that gave him plenary power so that he could do whatever he wants. And by whatever he wanted, I mean whatever he wanted. So Adolf Hitler, as I discussed before, didn't become a monster by himself. He had a lot of help. The Reichstag and the Reichsrat are equivalent to Congress and the Senate right here in America. Now, Germany at that time was called the Weimar Republic. It was a democracy just like we have here. Now, back to our discussion. So the framers of our Constitution made it in such a way that if the executive branch needs money, the executive branch has to go to the legislative branch, and the legislative branch will allocate money for particular tasks. But in order for that to happen, the executive branch has to explain to the legislative branch what it needs the money for. And here's the big the place for those two branches to compromise. You need money for this, that, and the other. Explain to me the purpose. Explain to me the usefulness. Explain to me how that's going to benefit the country. And if I'm satisfied, then I'll give you the money. Now, even if I'm satisfied, I may not give you all the money because I may compromise with you and give you some of the money. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I have a hard time understanding why people on both parties cannot grasp the concept that it is a good thing for both the legislative branch and the executive branch to work together to do things for the country. It is a good thing because that helps both, because if the legislative branch, if the executive branch is doing something, and it could be good for the country, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just something that the executive branch wants to do because it would be pleasing, but it doesn't add any value to the country. That's where the legislative branch comes in. That's why we have 535 members, 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate, which would debate, which would put it on for a vote, which would talk about whatever that they have to talk about in order to decide which way to go. So as such, the president asked Congress for money, and Congress said for the war, and Congress said, I don't think so, because I don't see, we cannot see the value that's added. As a matter of fact, it's not going to be good for the country. So Congress said, absolutely not. So what did the president do? He shut down the government in order to force the hands of Congress. Now, it is a good thing that Congress did not give in. It was a good thing that they did not give in. And the reason I say that is because imagine for 1 second, imagine for just 1 second that if you have a president and every time the president wants something, the president goes to that length and shut down the government to force the legislative branch to agree or to allocate money for that, whatever that is, then what's the point? What's the point of the legislative branch? then the president would continue to do it for everything. That means it becomes exactly what the framers of the Constitution were afraid of. Someone who does anything that he wants and there is no check and balances. So it was a good thing. In fact, we can thank God that the Democrats did not budget, did not give in. Now, for 2 years, the Republicans were in complete control. Now, we can tell you the few things that they did, and you tell me how good that is for the people. They passed a tax cut, $1.5 trillion tax cut. 1.2 out of that went to large corporation and wealthy individual. Hey, I forgot to mention, we, the people, are responsible for the $1.5 trillion. Now, you may have also heard that we have increased the deficit by borrowing $1.5 trillion, which I said over and over, even before that legislation was implemented, that it was bad news for the country. What else did they do? They attempted to repeal Obamacare. That was the third time that they did during the Trump administration. Had it not been for John McCain, Obamacare would have been completely gone. Now, why would your representative get rid of something that's beneficial to you? Ask yourself that question. And that's what they have as accomplishment. During those 2 years, they were in total control of the government. Now, they weren't in control for only 2 years. I used the 2 years during the Trump administration. They were in control during the Obama administration for since 2010. They were in control of both houses. What did they accomplish? They tried to repeal Obamacare 62 times during the Obama administration, and they tried to do it 3 times during the Trump administration. That's what they did. But what makes it even worse is the fact that during the Trump administration, we had problem. Now, forget about legislation for a moment. We had problem after problem. We have Donald Trump colluding with Russia. We have Republicans helping Donald Trump with their collusion, shielding the House Speaker, shielding the chairman, Devin Nunes, who was just another, almost like that, the defense, the lawyer for the Trump administration. He was supposed to be the chairman that did the oversight on the executive branch, but instead, what did he do? He became the defense attorney for the Trump administration. We had really serious problem, and of course we had this Fox, which is the propaganda machine for the Trump administration, and of course we have the Republican Party that say this is our core values. Now read any of those things and tell me which one of those Republicans during the 8 years they were in complete control, which one did they implement? So when I said that the Republican Party is in a crisis of leadership, it's not just a statement. It's not just a Don Lib who is talking. For the past 8 years, Republican has proven beyond a shred of a doubt that they really do not have anything to offer to the constituent. Now, there is one thing that they do, and that always works, and they continue to do it. They use fears and deception. Yes, they scare the constituent away from something, but not offering anything. They scare the constituent away from Obamacare because, well, it's going to kill grandma, it's going to kill job, it's bad for the country. None of that was true. So they scare the constituent away from something that could benefit the constituent, but they had nothing to offer. $1.5 trillion tax cut, they're giving $1.5 trillion to the people. Again, deception. They lie because they give 1.2 to large corporation and wealthy individual, and they give a scrap to the people. But they also didn't tell you that we, the people, are responsible for the whole bill. That's deception. It's not because they don't know, because they were the one who crafted the legislation. So yes, Republican legislators, they deal in deception, and they use scare tactic. Today, you may have already started to hear the sound of socialism, and you start hearing it everywhere because they want to scare you away from something that they never define what that is, and nor can they point to the fact that there is any possibility for that form of government to be here in the United States. And that's where the deception comes. Fears and deception, because they rely on their constituent ignorance in order to succeed. And so far, they have been very successful, because if you notice that every time that they scare the constituent, what happened? They continue to get the support of the constituent, because the constituent, as I always mention here, the constituents are naive, are gullible, and they are ignorant. So whatever the Republican legislator tells them, they buy it without even thinking about what they're being told. Now think about it. Now you start hearing everywhere you turn. If you turn to Fox, hey my God, this is socialism. Democrats want to turn the country into socialism. We don't want socialism here because that's bad for the United States. And that's what they bet on, that the average Republican constituent don't have the intelligence to understand that it's a scare tactic, because if they did, they would know that there is no possibility for the United States of America to become a socialist country. If they knew, if they had even, they don't have to be smart. They just have to have the average intelligence to understand that there is no way that can happen here in the United States of America. And yet, that's exactly what Republicans are using to scare the Republican constituent so that they can come and support Republicans. Yes, they rely completely on the ignorance of their constituent. And so far, they have been very successful, which means we don't see any reason why they would give that up. Why would they? This is what they do. That it's good for them, so they will continue to do it. So ignorance is what they rely on. They want their constituent to stay ignorant. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. In Washington now, for the past couple of weeks, there has been a raging debate about anti-Semitism, and that started, of course, with Ilhan Omar. Now, Ilhan Omar is a brand new congresswoman. She represents the 5th district in Minnesota. She's among the new breed of this new sweep of Democrats win during the 2018 midterm election. Mrs. Omar is one of only 2 Muslim women that enjoy this opportunity to represent people in her district. Now, the conversation about anti-Semitism, I'm not here, by the way, the discussion here is not to support or condemn Mrs. Omar, but rather to make a very important point about anti-Semitism. Now, anti-Semitism is hatred for Jews, deep hatred for Jews. Now, because of what happened in the past, especially in Germany, Holocaust, anyone, you may recall that history reports that at least 6 million Jews were executed, gassed, killed by Adolf Hitler. Deep hatred for Jews. Now, in 1945, the State of Israel was born, and Jews from all over the place, from all over the world, mostly Germany, went back home to establish in Israel. Now, the United Nations at that time, the short version, the United Nations crafted a resolution which allows Israel to have a country and be able to live side by side with the Palestine. Now, maybe in a later version, I will show you a map as to what was the Palestine and what was Israel and what it is today, to show you why it is probably important that when we are talking about when we're having any discussion about Israel, it becomes almost like a third rail. Any criticism about Israel, any criticism about Jews becomes anti-Semitic. So no matter what you say. Now, yesterday, a resolution was passed. Nancy Pelosi took upon herself to pass a resolution that's following this debate raging between Ilhan Omar and, of course, the rest of the country. According to the whole debate, this whole thing started with a journalist, Glenn Greenwald, I believe, that Ilhan Omar answered in a tweet. And here's what she said. Now, the reason that she said that she's a Muslim, obviously, people who are of different background, who come from different parts of the world, they have different culture, and they also have a story, a history. And we here in America, we tend to want to push on others whatever we have, we construe as being best, as being better. As such, you would find that we Americans do not have the patience to learn from others, do not have the patience to accept others, cultures, etc. So we prefer that everybody just complies to whatever we construe as being good, and as far as they do that, as long as they do that, we're fine with them. But otherwise, we have a problem with them. So Mrs. Omar made the statement in a tweet that she believes that her job, and she was pushing back against the statement, against, I guess there was a conversation that was maybe asking her for support for whatever that was going on in the conversation for Israel. So Mrs. Omar, being a Muslim, now if you're not a Muslim, you don't know what that means, because you do not, even if you know that there has been rift between Israel and the Palestine, and you understand it to the extent that you talk about black being discriminated against. So you're a white person, if you talk about black being discriminated against, your sense or your understanding of that is really very vague, and that must be understood as well, because you cannot enter you cannot really discuss that issue. You have to let the other side explain it to you in order for you to understand what it means, because you will never grasp it, because you never had the experience. And even if you read about it, even if you watch, there is no way in the world that experiencing something is different from reading about it, from hearing about it. Now, Mrs. Omar, rightfully so, can decide not to want to support Israel. So far, I'm not sure I see the problem there, because in Congress, in the Senate, we have people who don't want to support a government. So far, we say until North Korea decide to do whatever we ask Kim Jong-un to do, we're not going to support the country. And we have a bunch of such countries in the world. So Israel happened to be another country. So I am having a very difficult time sometimes understanding the difference, because today I'd like someone to explain to me when is criticism of Israel, when is criticism of Jews is not anti-Semitism. Because so far, everything that I've heard, every time that a conversation comes about Jews, about Israel, it always boils down to one thing: it is anti-Semitic. Now again, as I say, I'm not here to defend Omar or to condemn her, but to make a point. In fact, the resolution that just got passed, interestingly enough, made the very point that she was trying to make. In fact, that resolution saying that what she said actually has some truth to it, because I'll give you a point of reference. Steve King, for instance, the guy that Henry Olsen from the Washington Post used to compare Mrs. Omar to. He wrote an article saying that Ilhan Omar is now the Steve King of the left. Now, Steve King is a white nationalist, a white supremacist. He's been expressing himself that way for over a decade. Right? For over a decade. Now, for almost, he actually he's been in Washington since 2003, if I'm not mistaken, 2003, 2004. So this is 2019. So that's 15, 16 years, right? And he was never any different person. He's always been racist. He's always said things that's hurtful to blacks. I never heard anything from Henry Olsen. I never heard anything from Republican passing resolution. Never anything from Democrat passing resolution. Now, suddenly, the conversation is about Jews. It's about Israel, and a resolution is passed. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it is not good. I'm not saying it's probably a good thing to have that should have been done a zillion years ago. But the point I'm trying to make here is even the idea of the resolution corroborates the story, the concern that Mrs. Omar had. Because all this time, all those things have been happening in Washington. And Steve King is not the only one. I use him because he was the most vocal. But in Washington, what happened that is detrimental, legislation that are passed, that are even for those who do not open their mouth and say things that are hurtful to blacks, they pass legislation that are very detrimental to blacks. That's even worse. I always express this idea here. I prefer to deal with people who just show who they are. This way I know how to behave. But when people behind the scene are doing things that actually detrimental not just to an individual, but detrimental to our whole race, that's even worse. And that's what Republicans in general have been doing as far as minorities are concerned. So talking about passing resolution so that against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, and so on and so forth. So that actually tells you that Mrs. Omar was rightly concerned when she said that a lot of the things, a lot of the push in Congress to support Israel has to do with the fact that there are a lot of Jewish organizations that lobby the congressmen, the senators. So far, I'm not sure I see the problem there, because that is actually true. We have a lot of lobbyists, a lot of lobbying groups that live in Washington, and Jews have a few of them there that doing exactly what Mrs. Omar said. But suddenly, there is a need to pass a resolution against Islamophobia, against anti-Semitism. So Mrs. Omar wasn't wrong in what she said, because the very point of the resolution tells you that what she said is true, because it becomes necessary for that resolution to be passed when all this time, all those bad things that were being said about blacks, about other minorities, there was nothing that was done. But I come back to the question. What is anti-Semitism? Now, I'm not asking for the definition. I already mentioned that it is, well, hatred for the Jews. But what is it? When is something that's said about Jews, when is something that says about Israel is anti-Semitic? Because it looks like there is no way to debate what Israel has been doing wrong and not be called anti-Semitic. In fact, 4 years ago, I wrote an article entitled Flashing the Anti-Semitism Card. And that's what I related exactly this very point, that every time Israel is called to answer for its crime, everybody cries anti-Semitism. So here's the question to all those who so want to defend as a black individual of course, I'm sensitive to the fact that when people say certain things, then yes, it may be hurtful to people of that race, to people of that group. There is no argument there. That's not really the argument I'm making. The argument is, if Mrs. Omar was wrong when she said that Jewish lobbying organization propel the support for Israel. Now, we know that the United States has been supporting Israel almost unconditionally, as if Israel is the state of America. In fact, I say that U.S. has been supporting Israel to a fault, because Israel has committed its shares of atrocities, its shares of crimes, and they've been shielded by the United States of America. Now, is it anti-Semitic to call Israel to answer to its crime? Is it anti-Semitic? Any other country would have had to answer for its crime, but not Israel, because it would be, well, anti-Semitic. Now, the cartoon that I put in front of you kind of speaks for itself. Anything that says about Jews, it's anti-Semitic. But anything that says about any other group, including Islam, is freedom of speech. That's the way things are discussed here in the United States in general, and of course in the Western countries in particular. So I would very much like to get some help from someone, Jew or otherwise, to explain to me, when is criticizing Jews, criticizing Israel, calling on them to answer for their crime, when is it not anti-Semitic? That's what I would like to understand. I'd like someone to answer that question for me, because so far this whole hoopla about Mrs. Omar comment that I've been hearing all over the place, like she's dropped a bomb, that she said something that's not true. In fact, as I mentioned, the very resolution that just passed clearly said that Mrs. Omar was right, that whenever it's something about Israel, everybody jump up and down, it is anti-Semitic. About anybody else, it's freedom of speech. So, what is it? When is calling on Israel to answer for its crime not anti-Semitic? I very much would like to have someone to help me out on this front.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the people. Throughout history, dictators, authoritarians have always tried to delegitimize the media in order to get away with corruption, scandal, and yes, even abuse. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933, accusing the media of fabrication. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our only business is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent. It is necessary. It is critical. Our very freedom depends on it. You see the building behind me? Is a symbol of the most powerful office in the United States. And I would venture to say quite possibly in the world. We use that building in the movie to symbolize a stronghold in the country. Today, this building is being occupied by someone who has the least respect in the world. Someone that the world no longer seeks guidance from. Ironic, isn't it? You see, for as long as we can remember, since its existence, the United States has always been a country that the world, well, all the countries in the world look up to for guidance, for help, as ally. Even our enemies recognize we have a system of government that, who knows, one day they might want to emulate. Today, however, the world cannot run far away from the United States of America. The only allies we have, or the only allies we're left with, are a few dictators such as Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, and of course Netanyahu, now an indicted head of state. The United States has fallen really very, very, very low. And the reason is because in 2016, most of us went to the polls to vote not for the country, not for the future of the country, but rather for an individual. The race was between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Well, it is always between two people, isn't it? Now, I'm not here to debate who was best, but we have in full display the least competent individual who has occupied the Oval Office since the existence of the Republic. We have a serial liar. We have a corrupt individual, someone whose interests are only to himself. It is a sad story, but it is the story. So the road to 2020 cannot be a repeat of the 2016. There are already dozen Democrats candidates lined up to challenge Donald Trump for the office of the presidency. Now, we know politics is dirty. We cannot expect anything different. We cannot expect anything less. You see, in the past, we could rely on the people to make the right decision, especially when politicians decided not to. Unfortunately, if anything, the 2016 has taught us is the people, the very people who are supposed to help preserve the integrity of our nation, to safeguard our future, to make certain that politicians, yes, those who aspire to public office, respect the Constitution, respect the rule of law, and most importantly, show loyalty for the country. That's not what happened. 2016 not only provides us a candidate who doesn't have any of that, but even worse, the people who supported that candidate didn't have any such either. They were disloyal. They cheered for foreign interference. They cheered for foreign entity to interfere in our elections. They even encouraged foreign individuals to meddle so that the election could be tilted in their favor. That is not patriotism. We know they are not patriots because any patriot would know that you cannot support a foreign entity in your system of government. Besides, if you do that today, then you cannot complain tomorrow when the shoe is on the other foot. As such, we have been witnessing the erosion of our democracy. Yes, it's because there are millions of people who are ignorant to think it's better to have an ignorant individual in the Oval Office than to safeguard the integrity of the Constitution of the United States. Yes, people who think it's better to have an ignorant individual in the Oval Office than to safeguard the integrity of the Constitution of the United States. Yes, I know it's harsh words, and I know what should be expected as feedback, what should be expected as comments. But if you've been watching this program, you know I'm not an individual who shies away from calling the devil by its name. It is ignorance that put us in the predicament we are in today. Yes, it is ignorance that has put the country in the predicament it is today. The decision that were made to cast a vote for the current president of the United States were not made with knowledge, were not made because the supporters are smart. They were made because those individuals express ignorance. Those individuals, they express lack of patriotism. So it falls on the Democrats at this point, fully, solely, completely on the Democrats at this point, to redeem the United States of America, to pull the United States of America from the bottom of the pit it has fallen. Yes, the country has fallen to the bottom of the pit. Now we are in the company of dictators, of authoritarians. But this is not new. We were there before. You may recall that in 1861, a civil war erupted, and the reason is because there was one group who wanted to stay on the wrong side of history. So this is not new. We've been there. We've seen it. There are always this problem in the United States of America. But fortunately, at that time, there was also a group who decided that no matter what it took, they had to fight and win for the sake of future generations, for the sake of the integrity of our nation. So the road to 2020 cannot be just another presidential race. It cannot just be a race to remove Donald Trump from the Oval Office. Yes, that should happen as well. But it has to be a race to restore decency in America. It has to be a race to restore decency in the presidency, to restore decency in the Oval Office. And what that race means is people who are patriotic, people who have knowledge, people who understand that our country is worth much, much more than an individual, especially one who doesn't give a damn about the country, especially one who is not loyal to the country. A few days ago, you may recall, we heard from someone who knows the current president very well. His personal attorney who served him for over a decade. He said bluntly that Donald Trump is not loyal to the United States of America. Yes, it's going to be a fight between those who have knowledge and those who don't. It is going to be a fight between those who continue to cheer for ignorance and those who want to get ignorance out of the way. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fierce fight. We expect that. We already seen the line drawn in the sand. There is a fight coming. But what is much worse than ignorance is not to know the degree of one's ignorance. Is not to know that one is ignorant. And the past 2 years have taught us that indeed where we are at today, that's the predicament the country is in. Those individuals who continue to support Donald Trump despite all the damages he has caused to our nation, to our institution, to the rule of law, is a sure sign that the country cannot rely on the ignorant to help move the country to preserve our democracy for the future generation. 2020 cannot be just another presidential election. Decency must be restored in the building behind me. Ignorance cannot help. Ignorance is useless to society. It's a danger. It's the biggest threat to any democracy. JFK said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. We've seen it. We're living it. So let's make 2020 a year to reset the country, to put the country back in a path of knowledge, of progress, and to work to eradicate ignorance from within the constituency in the Republican Party. Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the people. Throughout history, dictators, authoritarians have always tried to delegitimize the media in order to get away with corruption, scandal, and yes, even abuse. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933, accusing the media of fabrication. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our only business is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent, it is necessary, it is critical of our very freedom depends on it. I do thank you for spending the time with me. I hope it was interesting and enlightening. Should you have any question, comment, criticism, suggestion, please do not hesitate to contact us. And if you have a topic you would like us to talk about, please let us know. We will research it and we will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program. In the meantime, we hope you have a wonderful afternoon or evening, whichever it happened to be. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
What if hip-hop never existed? Do you think there'd be as many heads screaming out, stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith & Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there'd be as many plays out there if there was no boost? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make six figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers. What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would've caused him to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, how much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have change filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at the house instead of the stop? Or Ali never got bopped by the cops? What if the little homie EZ didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? I don't know.